Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, this stinging letter by 74 senior retired bureaucrats, including Directors General of Police, Secretaries to the government, ambassadors, Supreme Court lawyers, academics, making a point that there is a complete breakdown of governance and a blatant violation of the rule of law in Uttar Pradesh. Now, we debate the contents of the letter with some of its authors and those who also are defending the UP government. Also on the program tonight, the latest inflation numbers are out and sadly they remain a matter of huge concern. We'll show you just how prices of key commodities across sectors remain high. Also, how encouraging numbers of the index of industrial production may not be that encouraging at all. They seem to be linked to a low base effect. In other words, they were up, but up from a huge low of last year. So what you need to do is actually look at where the index of industrial production was in 2019, and we'll tell you where it was and where it is now, whether it's actually higher or it's lower. That and inflation. But let's take a look at details of the letter that I just show you, which speaks of a complete breakdown of law in Uttar Pradesh. 74 officials have hit out at law and order in the state. So this group have said that there is this complete breakdown of governance. The letter has been endorsed by over 200 eminent citizens. They say the ruling regime in UP has ushered in a model of governance which swerves further away from the values of the Constitution. It seems clear that all branches of the administration, including the executive, magistrates and the police, have collapsed. Detentions, criminal charges and recoveries employed against all those who exercise their right to democratic protest. UP has seen a systematic blurring of the lines between actions of the state, particularly its police force and that of vigilante groups. The bias of the present government of Uttar Pradesh against Muslims has been open and uninhibited. Misuse of the National Security Act in the name of cow slaughter and against dissenters. The gruesome spectacle of several thousand dead bodies floating in the Ganga and buried in shallow graves in the sands along its banks. The world bore witness to the catastrophe that the people of UP had to endure owing to the failure of the government to act in time. Stop arbitrary detentions and torture of peacefully protesting students, minorities and dissenters. Stop the illegal and unconstitutional practice of encounters and extrajudicial killings, and the institutionalization and legitimization of vigilantism by appointing police mitras. Stop the misuse of draconian preventive detention laws, in other words the NSA, mainly used against Dalits, dissenters and Muslims. Joining us now to look at the contents of this very hard-hitting letter, Jawahar Sarkar, the former CEO of Prasar Bharati, the political analyst Geeta Bhatt with us as well, also Wajahat Habibullah, the former Chief Information Commissioner of India. Thank you very much for being with us. Mr. Habibullah, a lot of what you have said has been reported over the last several years of a progressive breakdown in law and order in Uttar Pradesh. Why have all of these bureaucrats, people like you and academics and others, chosen now to come together to write this letter? I ask this because your critics would say that you are targeting this government, the UP government, ahead of elections.
Well, the elections, of course, have something to do with it, but the fact is that the situation has become worse and worse. I think you can observe that, the whole world can observe that. And in consequence, one incident after another, no effort at all to bring the matter under control. Now, I myself have been writing to friends and colleagues who are serving in the government for many years. Now, we have not written collectively, but I have been in touch with the former DG, O.P. Singh and so on, when we felt that there had been excesses, and my colleague Harsh Mandir had in fact written about it. We brought that to the attention of the government. We have been party to various legal actions. There are cases pending in the Allahabad High Court, and we have written in our letter, referred in our letter, to judgments of the Allahabad High Court, which have been not honored by the UP government. So now the situation has, in our view, come to a certain head. and it needed to be brought to the attention of course, the Prime Minister and the Chief Minister, but also to the notice of fellow citizens across the country, that the situation in UP, particularly in UP, seems to be in a state of constitutional breakdown.
All right. Mr. Habibullah, one moment. I wanted to go across to Geeta Bhatt. Geeta, you know, I mean, the popular refrain would be that these bureaucrats have vested political interests. They're acting on behalf of the Congress or the opposition, this, that, and the other. But in fact, the second line of the letter is, as a group, we have no affiliation with any political party and are committed to the Constitution of India. These are bureaucrats who spent their lives doing this, their careers doing this, and they feel something is terribly wrong. How can you disagree with what they have said?
Well, Vishnuji, you know, the platitudes which have been thrown by some of the civil servants and the names of your handmaidens, people from judiciary in that list who have written this letter which you are showing, you know, it sounds similar to the same kind of a letter which was written also against the UP Chief Minister in 2018 by about 85 civil servants. And sorry to say, but it is exactly the same tone, the tone with which the opposition leaders are, you know, trying to raise their voice for serving their political
leaders.
Yes, but no.
I mean, how can you say that?
Let me at least complete. You have listened to my fellow panelists so patiently. At least give me a minute to speak. Now, the point is that, you know, these people who have written this letter, they are, I mean, who are they? They write with a lot of sense of entitlement, I must say that. And, they do so because they are the ones who have been at the helm of affairs for a very, very long period of time. And they, you know, considering themselves as the elite with that point of view, this letter has been written where there are certain questions which need to be asked. For example, they are questioning about Kerala journalist who has been, you know, they are saying that
Kappan, yes.
It has been unjust. Yeah, Mr. Kappan, that why he has been, allegedly he has been jailed. However, the fact is that the enforcement director has filed a charge sheet, a case against him. And there are some other Popular Front of India activists that there has been, you know, fraudulent transactions have been used for money of more than 1 crore, and that has been used for various anti-social activities. So those who are, you know, so responsible and considered as such responsible servants, and who, of course, have been very, very, you know, vehemently criticizing the elected leadership of this country on social media and everywhere, are time and again questioning, for example, talking about the AMU students, that there has been violence against them. We have seen the videos where there have been violent protests in AMU, and there have been attacks on policemen over there. There were several of them who had got injured. If the government is trying, if there has been a loss of private and public property worth crores of rupees, and if the government is trying to, you know, take certain measures in that direction, then in that case, you know, that is being questioned over in this
all right,
letter.
just one moment. I wanted to take that in some of the points you've raised to Jawahar Sarkar, who joins us now. Mr. Sarkar, one of the points mentioned by Geeta Bhatt was that a lot of you speak from a position of entitlement. A lot of you sound like you are opposition political leaders, and the tone of this against democratically elected leaders, she feels, is wrong. How would you respond?
You see, we know a bit about elections and a bit about government. All of us have spent about 30 to 40 years with government. So we don't actually require lessons from people who are remotely connected with some government of the moment. The first question is whether we are acting in an entitled manner. I beg to submit, we are depriving ourselves, if I may put it quite bluntly, depriving ourselves of various post-retirement opportunities, risking our lives, risking sticking our necks out like giraffes to take a point of moral order. This is a group which is known as constitutional conduct, and our sole motive, if anyone can disprove a single word of it, we will apologize. Our sole motive is to show the Constitution to those elected rulers who seem to have very scant knowledge of its functioning. That's all. It's not an oppositional stand. in any sense of the term once they act constitutionally and more properly, using stun grenades in a university. Look, I have worked for 40 years. I have never even heard of using stun grenades. We have used tear gas shells, all right. We had to control law and order. We know our obligations better than outsiders. But having said so, the extent and the bitterness with which suppression is resorted to is very dangerous for a democracy. That is our humble point. We are only showing the truth to the ruler, hoping that once in a while he looks at the mirror. Okay. That's all.
Geeta Bhatt, one of the points mentioned in the letter is stop the misuse of the NSA, which is a draconian preventive detention law. It's being mainly used against Muslims, Dalits and dissenters, in many cases journalists, as part of an effort at suppression. How would you respond to this basic allegation that finds itself being mentioned quite frequently in this letter?
First of all, the very thought that the differentiation between the insiders and outsiders, that itself, speaks volumes of the sense of entitlement, which I was Vishnuji talking earlier. Now, considering that the NSA is being used very frequently, it has been wherever it has been used. If there are activities which are against the interest of the country, then in that case, the government of the state or of the center has to, take things into their hand, and they have to take cognizance of such kind of activities. Also, in the letter time and again, what is being questioned is that the minorities, they are at a risk. This has been highlighted, time and again. But what happens is in terms of giving justice to people. But why is it that in a state like Rajasthan, where crime against women in last 1 year, rapes have increased by 30%?
No, but that's horrific. But we're talking about Uttar Pradesh.
But why is it? No, but why is it that these enlightened souls are not able to take into cognizance of whatever is happening
in
other states?
Okay, I'll put that question to them. Mr. Habibullah, one sec. Mr. Habibullah, the point is, why are you not talking about Rajasthan and why are you not talking about other states? Why are you talking about UP? Please respond.
Sorry, is that question to me?
Yes, sir.
Well, in this letter, we have addressed the question of UP. We have been addressing, and we've written a whole lot of letters on a host of subjects where we have criticized the different governments, or we have called into question the decisions of different governments. But this is a strategy of attacking our personal integrity instead of the content of the substance of the letter. I think, as I mentioned to start with, the situation in UP has reached a kind of point where we felt it was our duty as former government officials, yes, but as conscientious citizens of this country who have, in earlier years, been entrusted with actually being part of the administration, therefore can see quite clearly what the failure of administration is. Now, Ms. Bhatt, of course, is entitled to all her views, but you will notice when we've criticized the police, who else has criticized the police? The former DGP of the UP police itself, Mr. O.P. Singh, has day before yesterday written about the fact that how the UP police has let the tradition of the UP police down in an incident which occurred a few days ago, and criticized the action of the police. So this is not got to do with any political alignment, and therefore we're not taking up Rajasthan, or we're not taking up this. If Geeta is so concerned about it, let her write to us. Let her take it up with us. I mean, we are all open to meeting with members of the public. Let us say, take up this issue.
Okay, Geeta Bhatt, I think the point mentioned is that this is a voluminous letter. It speaks about institutionalization, legitimization of vigilantism. It speaks about love jihad, biased investigations. It speaks about encounter killings with numbers of so-called encounters, people who've been killed, circumstances, questions raised. It's given examples of misuse of NSA. It's given examples of misuse of or poor handling of the COVID crisis. In a situation like this, why could you not raise or counter some of these specific points than saying that Mr. Jawahar Sarkar or Wajahat Habibullah are biased and essentially bad people?
No, I'm sorry. I've never said they are bad people.
Okay, fine. That they're biased people pushing a particular agenda.
They speak with a sense of entitlement.
What's wrong with speaking with a sense of entitlement if that means that it's towards the Constitution? Shouldn't we all feel entitled in talking about the Constitution,
Of
ma'am?
course you're entitled to your opinion, my dear lady.
We all are citizens of this country, and in a democracy, we all have a right to speak. I am not questioning their right to speak. But I have an opinion about the letter, and I put forth in front of you. And that is what I am trying to say, that you see, these are when you are talking about the COVID
Geeta ji,
crisis,
just one point, you keep
the
mentioning entitled.
Largest number of cases coming out from Maharashtra and Kerala. Where everywhere else in the country, the number of cases have been going down.
What is speaking about the Constitution and defending the Constitution and looking at a state through the prism of the Constitution have to do with being entitled or not entitled, even if they are entitled?
Vishnu,
It's their birthright to talk about the Constitution and
right.
UP.
You need to talk from the point of view of the Constitution of this country.
But that's what they're doing.
If there any folly has taken place, then they have an entitlement to go to the judiciary and put up wherever there has been a folly.
All right, Mr. Sarkar, so basically, I think the point, yeah, go ahead, please respond. Yes, Mr. Sarkar.
No, I think the word she's fishing for is not entitlement, it's called experience. The serving officers who may be distressed at what the governments are doing are in no position to open their mouths. Remember that. We are covered by service laws. Therefore, it is incumbent on us, the retired ones, to intervene in certain occasions. We are not doing this habitually as it's being put out. The word she's looking for is experience. Our experience is what we need to put across. We will not be faithful to the Constitution or to the service or even to the pension if we keep quiet when the nation is passing through such a crisis. In 70 years plus, never in the history of 70 years plus have 200 IAS, IPS, IFS and central service officers got together in sheer alarm. We are distressed at what is going on.
Okay.
We are not an opposition party, for God's sake. Don't shoot the messenger. That's
All right.
what we're trying to say.
Okay, I need to wrap this up now because I need to move on to another big story today. Thank you all very much for being with us. We're looking at the inflation in the country, and this is something that directly impacts millions of Indians. Inflation is above 6%. That was the RBI's red line. It had to be ideally beneath 6%. The question is, the centre doing enough to reduce prices? 6.26% is the retail inflation number. That's remained high. It's dipped just 0.04%, so essentially the same. Urban inflation has risen to 6.4%. That's up 0.5%. The index of industrial production is up 29.3% in May, but that is possibly because of a low base effect. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'm just going to quickly move across to my panelists. Madan Sabnavis joins us, as does Rajat Sethi and Amitabh Dubey. Amitabh, shall we just, before we talk about inflation, talk about industrial production? Because the way it's been put out is that the index is up 29.3% in May, but that it's up 29.3% perhaps, but is that because of a low base effect from last year when it had gone down, as I understand it, more than 33.4%? It's not what it was in 2019.
Yeah, in the kind of situation we're in, a month-to-month annual comparison is meaningless because we had a very severe dip during both the waves, the first wave and the second wave, and of course during the lockdown. So I think we should look at moving averages, we should look at longer averages, and that we have to see how that pans out. I think there is evidence of what they call a V-shaped recovery, but this is to some extent an artifact of exactly what we're talking about. So I think it's meaningless to look at these short-term movements, and we have to see how these things play out over a longer period.
Rajat, effectively, as I understand it, IIP, the index of industrial production, is still 14% below the May 2019 level. So if you hype it to saying that it's 29.3% up from last time, it's not really telling the full story.
No, I think nobody is contesting the fact that there has been a low base effect, and this is why you've seen really high numbers. Some of them have gone up to the extent of 45 to 50%. So everyone, any serious commentator would know that there is a low base effect there. But what needs to be understood and what is being celebrated perhaps in the government circles is that there is a considerable momentum towards coming out of
recovery, yes.
coming into a recovery phase, and that is what is cheering people up. It is going to cheer the markets up as well. So I don't see anybody is discounting that fact at all. That will be a misreading of why the government is so enthusiastically putting out these numbers.
Mr. Sabnavis, let's look at the other part of this, the prices of commodities. That's the bottom line. What does the average person actually spend? So let's bring up that graphic 3. Let's set up full screen on our screen. First, let's take a look at the price of petrol and the price of diesel. And the change that you can actually see, it's up 20.5% between January and July. Diesel up 21.6%, LPG up 20.2%, milk up 4.3%. And let's just keep changing. Chana dal down 1.3%, it's a bit cheaper now. Mustard oil up 9.09%. Is that it? Is that the last point? All right. And so, Mr. Sabnavis, here's the bottom line. If you've got the prices of so many commodities across segments going up to what they are now, are we not in deep trouble as we try and recover? People still out of jobs, salaries have gone down, inflation hitting the middle class person.
Actually, Vishnu, before I come to inflation, I would also like to give a comment on the IIP numbers. Yeah. I think the IIP numbers doesn't really cause for any kind of celebration, because we should remember that one is, of course, a statistical base effect which you spoke of, but we should remember that the corresponding PMI numbers which came for May was actually in a downward direction. And if I look at June, we actually gone into the negative territory. So I think we should not have this complacency to say that, look, there is a kind of a V-shaped recovery. So I have a slightly different view from what was said by the other panelists. That I think that we're actually going downhill, at least in the months of May and June, going by the PMI. Whether it's going to recover in July on account of the opening up of the economy, it needs to be seen. But my sense is we may not even cross the 50 mark as far as the PMI is concerned. Now, if you look at inflation, I think inflation has been a kind of a double whammy for us, because even last year we had inflation in the region of 6 to 7%. It's the second year which we're having of over 6%. Now, what it actually means, Vishnu, is that as a consumer, I've been affected first by 6% and cumulatively by another 6%. So I don't think it's happy time for consumers. And I would tend to believe that one of the chief responsible factors is the price of fuel. Not because it affects my driving costs, which of course is a direct thing. You can say maybe I'm a better off, I'm a rich person, I can pay for it. But I think the higher prices of diesel have fed into the price of transportation, and transportation goes into each and every commodity. So a large part of our commodity basket, where we're seeing inflation even of primary products, food products, they're actually being transported by road, which means that we have seen that your freight index had actually shown an increase of around 7 to 8% over the last 1 year.
Right.
And finally, if I'm a transporter, I'm going to put the cost on.
So that's a key point, and I take that Rajat had a point. Input costs have been going up as a result of oil prices going up. That's part of this huge problem. Rajat, go ahead.
I think that's the only explanation that we need to, really focus on. Because see, it's very easy to mix inflation and price rise. And it's one of the common mistakes that people do. Please understand, in inflation, and a classic definition of inflation entails, an overheating of an economy, an overall increase in the goods and services across the economy, and a constantly changing demand and supply of that. That inflation, that overheating, which should bother the RBI and try to, reduce the liquidity in the market, that trigger this 6% is not going to do. Primarily because this is essentially a single commodity price hike, which has led to across the board consumption basket, which has increased the cost of all the products that you've been talking about. So please understand, there is a difference between a price rise, which perhaps RBI will have very little to do with, which is governed by largely the international markets, vis-a-vis a classic case of inflation, where the RBI will perhaps have to look into the medium term and the longer term view and try to take corrective course corrections at this stage. But I don't see the economy getting overheated in its classic definition.
Amitabh, is this all linked to price and international and oil prices, which are very high?
Yeah, no, I don't actually agree with what Rajat said. If you look at core inflation, which is inflation without food and fuel prices, that is well above the historical trend line. In fact, that's also above 6%. So there is certainly a fuel component. And the RBI Monetary Policy Committee itself suggested to the government that they cut the excise duties on fuel as one of the steps to reduce inflation, which they have not done so far. And as we know, the excise duty has tripled in the last 6 or 7 years on petrol and diesel. The concern is that with core inflation higher and so many of the different commodities that you listed on your chart climbing, is that we could end up in a period of stagflation in the sense that demand continues to remain weak if you look at a longer period of time. Consumer demand has been weak basically since demonetization, and of course it dropped very sharply during the crisis of the last year. So the risk that we face is that with balance sheets damaged of households and consumers in a very risk-averse mode, and companies also reluctant to invest, that we'll end up with a situation where the growth is not picking up very quickly, but the price inflation is very high, and this is a bad equilibrium to find yourself.
All right, I'm completely out of time on this program. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us, but these inflation numbers give people in this country no assurance at this stage. Hopefully things will improve in the days ahead. We need to fight COVID for that. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. It's time now for us to take this short break.